Welcome to Capital Tycoon, the place where future innovators come to learn. My guest today is Tang. He's a corporate financier turned chef turned EdTech entrepreneur. Alan, thank you for joining my podcast. So my first question to you is, what's the meaning of entrepreneurship to you?
Josh, well, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. It's a good question. I think entrepreneurship for me is about taking a risk to do something that can make a difference. So a lot of people dream about being an entrepreneur, but actually it's incredibly hard, incredibly risky, but you actually learn so much from it. And it's a journey, right? You get to learn a lot about yourself along that way.
Yeah. And tell me a bit about your experiences. So you were voted the most innovative educational project by over 11,000 parents and educators, and you've achieved your goal of giving students from less privileged backgrounds access to CoLab, and working in partnership with some of the most innovative schools in the world. So tell me more about those.
Yeah, I mean, I guess maybe it helps if I just give you a bit of context. So my background is not in education. I used to work in corporate finance, building these onshore offshore wind farms, and very much, just trying to do the right thing, build these things that could give us sustainable renewable energy, moving away from oil and gas. I transitioned away from that to pursue a dream of being a chef. I think I'm crazy for doing that, but actually, it opened a lot of doors. It taught me a lot of skills, things I didn't know about myself, and actually gave me a lot of softer skills that I hadn't used or learned working in the corporate finance world. Things like resilience, things like stamina to work long hours, how to deal with things changing last minute. When don't have an ingredient, you have to adapt a recipe. And then I ended up working as a chief of staff to different startups, taking them from seed to Series A, helping these C-suite solve the most pressing problems. And a couple of years ago, I ended up working for a company called Synthesis, which is I guess you can call it the Elon Musk online school. And that was when I really saw the impact of education, how much it can do. It was then that I was hooked, and I really realized that education can do so much for the world, and it can really help develop the next group of leaders, innovators, experts. And so I've dedicated myself to really making that happen. Me and the team have come up with CoLab, which is this online program that brings together kids from around the world, aged between 7 to 14, and we use games, discussions, and escape rooms to teach them these life skills. And really, it's been quite a journey. We've been going for 11 months. We now have over 180 kids from around the world. We work with 6 different schools globally. These schools tend to be quite innovative, quite forward-thinking, typically have an online arm. And we have just won that award, which I'm really thankful for our community for voting for us. It's really validating and rewarding.
That's insightful. And I'm curious to know what got you into the edtech space in the first place. Why education?
To be honest with you, if you asked me 10 years ago, I wouldn't have gone into education. It wasn't a sector that I was interested in, but working for Synthesis, the Elon Musk online school, I saw the impact that education can have on kids, just even like 3, 4 weeks, having that interaction, building that trust, building that relationship, and coaching these kids and helping them grow. The feedback from parents saying, oh, you've helped my daughter become more confident, my son's making friends easier. That's when you know you're really making a difference. And I think you've seen so many cool projects from around the world, like Alpha Schools in Austin, TKS in Canada. You've got BDales in the UK. Like there are so many cool schools just trying to do it a different way, trying to promote a different way of learning, and moving away from this sort of standard approach to actually quite personalized is really good to see. And you've got EdTech platforms like ourselves, like Synthesis, like Recess, trying to push the boundaries of what's possible. We're not competing with schools. What we're doing is actually offering a supplementary process service where we can help these kids learn, you know, I guess these durable skills in a way that's engaging and fun.
Okay. And another question which comes to mind is regarding the traditional education system, do you think eventually um, the education system will adopt these kinds of models like synthesis, TKS, and the other schools you mentioned are doing already? Or and what are some um, why hasn't school changed in the last since ever since the Industrial Revolution, let's say?
I mean, so to be very transparent, I think there's always going to be room for schools. Schools cater to the masses. They are a place where people congregate. They're where a lot of relationships are formed. And actually, I'm still best friends with some of the people I went to school with. Um, so I think they're really useful. And when you grow up with these people and you grow up together, going through the same things, you can really create quite the bond. So absolutely for schools. I think that the challenge is that I think the world has moved on from since the Industrial Revolution, right? So why does the questions I'd be asking are why does a school need to be 8 to 3, 9 to 4? Why are we teaching classes that are sort of modular? Why are we not showing that actually maths can be used in design? There are so many ways to interconnect it all. And the interdisciplinary mindset is kind of where I see the world going. So if that's the case, why aren't we teaching kids these skills in a way that makes sense? What I find is really interesting is the Alpha School approach, right? They spend 2, 3 hours a day doing the core subjects so they can still get the grades and you know, the scores needed to be able to get into a good university, a good school. But actually, they also then spend the afternoons doing passion projects. Um, and that enables them to develop skills and different aspects of their lives that they want to pursue. And when you're interested and engaged, it's really easy to dive really deep and become an expert in a particular thing. I'm sure you've seen this with your fellow students at TKS. Um, there is this desire to drive and do something really innovative, and that's where I see education going. I think it's hard, if something's not broken, why would you change it? That's always going to be the argument. Also, it's kind of a chicken and egg scenario, right? So to get into a good job, you need to have good grades. To get good grades, you need to go to good university. To go to good university, you need to go to a good school. And it's kind of like the whole infrastructure would need changing. It's difficult. It's really complex as an industry. But you're also seeing people push the boundaries, and there is never going to be a one size fits all approach. And I think schools will always be the majority. But to have other platforms, other startups, other companies promoting different things and offering opportunities and choices to different parents and students is only going to be a good thing.
Those are interesting points. And now, what are some challenges you have faced in business?
It's so as the chief of staff to different startups, the challenges you see are always the same, right? Cash flow, funding, hiring the right talent, creating the right culture, finding product market fit. Those are always going to be the same. And even at CoLab, having seen those, we're still facing some of those, right? So we are bootstrapped. We are very much we don't want external funding. We very much are trying to do business the right way, which I think is really important, and it's authentic and it really helps ensure that the culture is right. But even then, we have challenges with resourcing, trying to find the right facilitator, for example, is difficult. We've maybe interviewed 150, 160 people. We've hired maybe 10. We have a certain standard and we want everyone who comes in to be better than, like just to keep pushing the boundaries. Obviously, finding product market fit is difficult. You might have an idea of what works and what's needed, but actually, is the market willing to pay for it? If so, what are they willing to pay for? And that's always going to be a discovery. And then just trying to make sure that you have the right culture. I think that comes from the founders, and the founders really need to live and breathe by their values. And that's something that we've tried to do. And if you're not authentic, if it's not real, people can see right through that. So loads of levels to that. And then just trying to build something that's sustainable. Being an entrepreneur is hard, it's a lonely journey. You never want to take time off because you're creating this thing that's your baby, but actually maybe taking time off is the best thing for you. I like to say this a lot, but it's a marathon, not a sprint.
That's interesting. And now I wanted to come back to your experience at Synthesis. So, what was your experience there like? And yeah, t tell me more about that.
It was interesting. They did things very differently, even as a startup. And I love the fact that they basically brought together this group of amazing people who were really passionate about a problem and they just let us fix it. So at the start, there wasn't a lot of structure. There wasn't a lot of, it was kind of just community driven and we'd have all these different projects running. And it felt very a bit chaotic, but actually it felt like everyone was doing the right thing. And the driving thing was how can we help the kids? And through that, I got introduced to this idea of Socratic questioning. I got introduced to this idea of actually facilitating and coaching as opposed to teaching, how games could be used to teach kids life skills. And yeah, it was really cool. Met loads of really great people there. It's probably one of the only companies that I would have worked for free, just because I really believe in the mission and vision. Obviously, that their mission and vision has changed a lot ever since they're now more of an AI tutor. They care more about teaching maths. I think the AI tutor is mostly focused on maths. And for me personally, I think that education needs to have a human touch. So I'm not convinced that just having an AI tutor is enough. But I've met some really great people that I'm still an investor at Synthesis. I want them to do well. But for me, I'm building something that's very different, something that's actually much more human, because I think that actually education needs to be more personalized. It needs to have more of a soul, which is why we're very much, there is an element of a product and technology, but it is very much human based.
That's interesting. And can I get more into the AI aspect of this? So, what do you think? How will AI play a role in the future of education from what you know?
You can see it already, right? So, but it's still a minority because a lot of teachers are still not sure how to use it. They're still worried about safeguarding and data and everything else. But I see it just growing and growing, not just from, generative AI, which I think is just the very basic level, but could we maybe use AI to help teachers with the mundane tasks like marking? You know, Marking takes a lot of time. It's probably not the most effective use of the teacher's time, and it's repetitive. The challenge is how do you then build a model that is fed with enough data to know what is good and what's bad? And how do you know that it's right? Because sometimes it hallucinates, right? So how do you know that it's going to work? Could you use, I think actually AI is really powerful with using it as almost as like someone to do a counter argument for you, someone to be a devil's advocate. So am I right in there to be like, I want to teach this. These are the constraints. These are the barriers. This is what I'm looking for, and prompt that. And then the AI might push back on a few different things. And it's almost like a brainstorming exercise with a real human, but with so much more data. And I think that's really powerful. And we've used it quite a lot, not just at CoLab, also my other projects. Um, I think that's something that teachers could start using a lot of. But then there are issues with AI at the same time, right? People need the right training, the right firewalls need to be in place. When you're working in the school, there's a lot of children's data, not just names, like contact details, images. You have to make sure that the safeguarding is done well. And to be honest with you, schools can be quite reluctant to do that because there's an element of risk. So there needs to be an education piece there. But in general, I think that actually AI could take such a big part in education. It just needs to be done the right way at the right pace and not just doing a blanket approach.
Yeah, those are important points. And could you expand on CoLab and your current work with your startup?
Yeah, I mean, so the idea is that we have these sessions once a week for students around the world, bring them together, share languages, they can share cultures. It's 12 students, 2 adults, facilitators, and we throw the kids into a challenge, right? So they get an option of a game, a discussion, an escape room, and they get to vote, and they have to show that agency to decide amongst themselves, okay, which challenge are we going to do? How do we vote on that? How do we get consensus? And through that, these students start developing voice, they start to develop confidence in their decision making, and they also start to understand how it is to work in a team. They then go into these challenges, and we don't tell them how to play it. We don't tell them, how it works, but we tell them the rules, and then they have to figure it out. So it could be The group of students need to escape a dungeon, and to do that, they need to evade all the guards. But when there are 12 of you and there are guards littered all around, it's quite easy to get caught. So through that process, we teach the kids impulse control, emotional intelligence. And what we see is that actually we intentionally make it difficult and make it so that kids will always get sent back to the start, because we want the kids to experience frustration. We want them to understand how to navigate those frustrations with other people. Are you going to point fingers, or are you going to actually figure out how to solve the problem? That's just one example. Another one is a game that's crossed between checkers, chess, and Catan, the board game. And through that, we're teaching the kids about second order thinking. We're teaching them about strategy. We're teaching them about, okay, opportunity cost. And actually, these are the things that schools touch upon, but maybe don't delve deep enough. We allow the kids to delve really, really deep, 4 or 5 levels deep, so they can start having these spikes in their experiences. And my job right now, or our job right now, is to build enough good curriculum to give these kids new challenges all the time. Because it's easy to make something that's educational. It's very easy to make something that's fun, but to combine the two is incredibly difficult. We also are starting to build partnerships with schools, partnerships with different organizations like First Lego League, because we know that we can't do this alone, and we also know that we want to share what we've learned with the best people. So the edufuturists, the guys there, we always champion them. We promote them because actually they're spreading the word of not just us, but loads of different educational leaders and thought leaders about what can be done. And when we start sharing this, it generates ideas, it creates more innovation in the space, and actually that just benefits the students.
Okay, and obviously you're teaching skills that would be required in the future for these students and young people. But what would you say are the 3 most important traits that young people learn?
So we teach a range of skills, right? So each challenge focuses on a particular macro and micro skill. So it could be communication, leadership, emotional intelligence, empathy, impulse control. Um, for me, I think it's not just students that need it, also adults. So a lot of companies will come to us and say, we want to run CoLab because we have a slightly dysfunctional team. We want it to work better. And when it's online, when it's through an avatar, when it's through a game, it's not so personal. It's not me versus you. It's our avatars working together. I think that adds to an element of that, but it's also fun, which means that actually it doesn't feel like work. So we are seeing more of that. But we started CoLab because we saw that a lot of kids were graduating, going to the world of work. They weren't ready. Didn't know how to work with others, didn't know how to communicate, didn't know how to act in person, didn't know, have that initiative to explore. And this is obviously generalizing. I think a lot of kids have these skills. I think maybe they just don't have the confidence to try it. They're so maybe afraid of failure. So going back to your question, Josh, what we try to do is we try to teach kids all these skills, but it culminates into helping them develop that curiosity to explore, helping them to build up the confidence to try out new things and to test things out, and then helping them develop this resilience so that if they fail, if they make one mistake, they can bounce back. Because I'll be honest, the things that I've learned, the best things I've learned, have come from me making a mistake. But most places, whether it's school, work, even at home, it's not encouraged. And actually, it's the best way to learn.
I couldn't agree more. And I also had this from another business person, and he also said that if you're not making mistakes, you're doing something wrong. Or if my employees aren't doing mistakes, then they're doing something wrong. I'm paraphrasing, but I couldn't agree more. And of course, better not to make less mistakes as much as possible. Mistakes are the learning points.
Well, we tried to reframe it, right? So it's not so much of a mistake as it's an experiment. Have a hypothesis, minimize the impact of it, downside impact, test it out. If it works, great. We'll put more money into it and put more resource into it. If it doesn't work, stop doing it. I think the key thing is learning from that and having this conversation of, okay, what could we do differently next time? What worked, what didn't work? But also setting the expectation and actually encouraging your employees, your students to do it, because they've grown up in a world where you shouldn't make mistakes. And you know, I saw this in the chef environment a lot, where a lot of chefs would make a mistake, they would try to hide it. And ultimately the customer, the people eating it is going to suffer from that, right? So the best chefs, the best restaurants, they encourage you to just be open. Chef, I've made a mistake. I'm going to put another one in. It's going to be 5 minutes. They will respect you more for owning up to that and then being transparent. And it just means that you can maintain the quality. And I think that this applies not just in the chef world, but in life, in school, and work.
Yeah. And what have been, speaking of mistakes or failures, what have been some highlight failures which have proved pivotal to your career and which have helped you grow better?
There's been a couple. So the couple that stay to mind, that they may be not pivotal, but they remind me of certain things and lessons. So the first one was I was 6. I was going to Chinese school. My parents wanted me to learn Cantonese. I was a bit arrogant. I thought, I could just not practice for this exam. I'll pass. It's fine. I got 0. I actually got 0 in this exam. I remember sitting through that exam being like, I don't understand anything. Um, that feeling of shame, that feeling of embarrassment coming home with a big fat 0. And then my parents being like, what did you get? And I showed them this exam paper. I never wanted to live that again. So from that day on, I promised myself I would never fail another exam. I haven't. For the last 30 years, I've never failed another exam. And it taught me, okay, how to pass exams, how to learn, how to be effective with my time. And also gave me that work ethic of actually you need to work to be able to get results. It's not just luck or talent. That's not enough. You need to actually train. So that was really insightful. I think the other thing was saying yes to things. So maybe it was a failure, maybe it wasn't. So I joined a charity as a trustee, and they asked me to help them with X, Y, and Z, a few different fundraising things. And one of the celebrities that I got involved wanted to run the London Marathon with us. He pulled out 5 weeks before the marathon was due and said, "Look, unless you pay me more money, I'm not going to do it." We ended up asking around, no one else was available because 5 weeks is not enough time to train for a marathon. I volunteered with 4 weeks' notice to run this, 26-mile race. And it was painful. I made lots of mistakes with my nutrition, with my training. I took a week off to go skiing, but I finished it. And that process taught me about resilience. It taught me about anything's actually possible. It's just in your head. And there's, multiple different versions. Like there's a lesson I learned where I joined the company and I knew from day 2 it was the wrong company, wrong culture, wrong people. It just wasn't me. I persevered for 3 months and then actually I should have just called it quits and stopped working there. And that was a mistake, but now it's taught me the product and what the company's selling isn't that important. It's more about the people around you. Do you get on with them? Can you learn from them? Are they inspiring? Do they believe in the same thing? If you have that, the company will do really, really well. So, those have all helped me, who've shaped me to be who I am. They've shaped my thought process. They've shaped the way I see the world. And yeah, I would encourage them.
Wow, that's so insightful. And then coming back to EdTech, I suppose, what are some books you recommend for people who want to get into the EdTech space, books or resources which have helped you early in your career? And also, who are some role models in the EdTech space?
There are plenty of role models in the EdTech space. I follow maybe 600 people. Um, there are too many to name. I think for me, everyone has a different opinion on where education should go, and everyone has a different, idea. I don't think there's a particular right or wrong answer, and I don't actually believe in extremes. I've done that and it doesn't work. I think it's very much about a balanced approach and what works best for the child and the sort of people that I look to for innovation. So there's Sophia High School, what the team are doing there to drive innovation in the space, to do this online school in a different approach. It's not easy, and they've done it in a really, really authentic, real way that's scalable. So what Melissa and the team have done there is great. Al Kingsley, really great education newsletter every week. He shares, he champions people, he promotes good causes. Like we need more people like that because we know that we can't do it alone. So having people champion you, having people share best practice is really great. Obviously, the EduFuturist guys wouldn't be here without them and all that support. And actually, those guys again creating this really amazing community of EdTech and educators who really want to make a difference and for the right reasons. So those guys, Ben, Steve, always going to have your back. Um, but there are so many, right? And I think there are a lot of unsung heroes in this space who don't maybe post on LinkedIn, who don't talk about it, but they should be celebrated because they do some amazing work. And actually, being a teacher is hard. I don't know, Josh, if you know anyone who's a teacher, long hours, emotionally very draining, but they do it because they care. Even the pay is quite low, but they do it because they care. And those are the people that we should be celebrating more than, people like us who maybe have all the fame and glory, but actually none of us would work if all of us didn't actually put in towards the same effort and ideas. You asked about books. I don't actually uh, have any books about education specifically. I believe in this interdisciplinary mindset. I believe in taking ideas from different places. So to give you an example, uh, Rickle, the game that I talked about, it's taking inspiration from Catan. We've just made a game which actually takes ideas from poker, from mahjong. Uh, there's like opportunity cost and first mover advantage and all this stuff, uh, scattered within it. Like we don't believe in just looking at it one way. And actually, the people that we hire all have different experiences because they can bring together other aspects of their life. So one of our challenges right now is getting the students to come up with their own language, their own terminology, and then interviewing other students who have come up with a different language, different culture, and seeing how they communicate. So it delves into creativity, it delves into a bit of acting, um, and storytelling. It's really, really great. Um, there is a book, I'm just going to grab it, it's called Range. So the idea is that it talks about why generalists are really powerful people to know and to have in your business. So that book Range talks about, you have Roger Federer versus Tiger Woods. Federer played pretty much every sport under the sun. Tiger Woods started playing golf since he was 2 years old. Both have done really well, but one's had much more longevity, one's had arguably much more success, right? And it's just, is there a right or wrong way? We don't know. But actually having that generalist approach to life is quite powerful. And I see it myself in my day job. But I don't have, I don't think I have a specialism. I am the chief of staff. I've done pretty much every role in the company. And what I guess my superpower is I can glue the things together and I can bring everything together. If you had just loads of specialists, could they do that? Would they know how to communicate with each other? Would they know how to bring it together into a cohesive plan? I'm not convinced.
Hmm. That's an interesting perspective. And yeah, often in society, I suppose we're told to specialize in one thing or like going into university, specialize in only this field or maybe two fields. So
Yeah, I
yeah.
mean, this is why I admire the US approach to education, right? So you don't just master one thing. You don't have to choose early on. You can have, major and a minor in something, and it means you have quite a broad perspective of things. And that's not always the case. So I think that that's something I think from the US education system we can take away. You mentioned some other books. So not Brewdog, Shoe Dog is a really good book about entrepreneurship and the story of Nike. But then there are other things, right? So The Hustle, really great newsletter to sign up to. You have TLDR, which is very similar but focuses on specific niches. You also have a few different podcasts that you can listen to that talk about, how Nike went from 0 to 100, how much debt they took on, all the risks that they took on, but it's still successful. You have loads of resources available. I actually think that those podcasts are just really, really great for aspiring entrepreneurs.
Okay. I'll have a look at this. And what are your favorite education systems in the world? Which countries would you say are role models?
We don't have a particular role model. I think each have their pros and cons. and they're just at different stages. So I really like the Welsh curriculum because it focuses on this holistic development of the child as a whole. The US has a lot of emphasis on social emotional learning. Each one has their own particular pros and cons, right? And then what I'm trying to get to is a balanced approach is probably the right way. You know, you could go homeschooling, you could do world schooling, you could go study in the UK, you could study in the US. They all have good and bad things. And I think it's more about what works for the child and having that communication channel open as a parent and talking to them and saying, this doesn't work, you know, let's move here, let's try this. And it might be seen as quite scary, it might be seen as a risk, but actually, if you know it's not going to work, and you compare that to maybe something that has a 50% chance of working, you're going to go down the second route. I mean, Josh, you're probably the perfect example, right? You lived in the UK, now you're studying in the US. You've seen different ways of studying. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, good question. I think definitely I think the US is much more different to in that yes, you have more options and flexibility, and also like from the start, and you can change at any point in time. Also, from my mind, speaking of from the admissions experience, they do see you as a whole-rounded person. I can't speak to the UK admissions. I haven't applied to any UK university, but from what I know and from my friends who applied to the UK university, it's very they just only look at you mainly on academics, and so yeah, and I agree with the balanced approach. I think it's definitely, and it should be based on tailored to the individual, I suppose.
So I'll give you an example, right? When I hire someone into any of the companies I work at, I don't care about your academics. They help get you through the door. They show that you're smart. You can learn. But the key things I look for are, do you fit into my team culturally? So are you good with people? Are you a team worker? Do you believe in the mission? Are you able to learn? And do you have a desire to learn? If you don't have all three of those boxes ticked, I'm probably not going to hire you. You know, you could be the smartest, best person in the world, but if you don't fit in and no one likes working with you, you're not going to get a job. Likewise, you know, you might be culturally a great fit, but if you don't want to learn and you're lazy and you don't have the ability to learn, again, how much value are you going to be adding to the company? And I think that's really important. So if you work backwards from there, you know, maybe the education process should be thinking about how can we start helping our students develop these skills, or how can we start helping them become entrepreneurs, starting their own projects. I think that's kind of what I would be looking for.
Okay, yeah. And well, you were a judge for a hackathon we had in TKS. So I'm just curious to what are your thoughts on the Knowledge Society TKS for those that don't know? And yeah, could you share your opinion?
So before I joined as a guest to TKS, you know, on the panel, I know a few people who've worked there who've championed it from day one, and I love the idea of it, where it's almost like an entrepreneurship program, right? And kids from around the world come together. I've never been to, well, it felt like almost like a pitch event where the students at that age are so knowledgeable. You know, they were talking about what are they talking about? There was stuff about DNA and how actually they could change it. And when I was told, don't hold back, ask questions you would ask, you know, someone you're going to invest in, and they could they could answer all of it. I was talking about wildfires. There was a project about wildfires and how you put them out. And again, the level of detail and level of confidence to be able to articulate your answer and push back and actually, you know, just get involved was like nothing I've seen before. And everyone was so much mature than what I've seen from other I guess education journeys. There are things that I would probably change. Yeah, there are things that could obviously be better, but as a group, to have that confidence, that experience, level of articulation, and the amount of work that's gone in behind it really showed that actually there is something special there. And I'm not surprised that a lot of, I guess, a lot of the TKS alumni have gone on to do some amazing things. They've gone on to, you know, be acquired by Google. It is a really cool program. I wish it was more accessible. I know you have a bursary and you offer scholarships, but for me, one of the key things about education is that it should be accessible because it can make such a big difference to someone's life. Um, and I've been approached by a few potential TKS students who couldn't afford it and they had to do fundraising. And I just wish that wasn't the case. But obviously, like any educational program, even CoLab, it's a business. It has to run like a business. So there's only so much money you can do to allocate to help these students. But overall, TKS is brilliant.
Great. And now, what is your advice, having worked with young people? What is your advice for the youth generation and essentially future change makers who want to make a positive impact on humanity?
I would say first thing is don't be afraid to think differently and push the boundaries. The reason if we all did the same thing going forwards, there would be no innovation. It would just be stayed and stale. So use youth as your excuse and just try things out, throw out bold ideas. They may get rejected, but actually, without that, we wouldn't be moving forward as a society as a whole. I would say have the resilience to bounce back. So things won't go right, things will go wrong, but use that as as a way to learn. Think about what went well, what didn't go so well, what could you have done differently, and actually think about using that as extra motivation to help you to the next stage. Don't be afraid to ask for advice. I found that, growing CoLab, we just went out asking for advice from everyone, not just educators, but parents, students, other entrepreneurs. We got given some amazing ideas and they've come from a range of different places. So I'd say don't be afraid to just try things out. And finally, make time for yourself to reflect. So I think reflecting, I have this practice where every Friday, 4 o'clock, I'll spend half an hour thinking about the week, what went well, what didn't go so well, what I could have done differently, what things that I shouldn't do. I write it down, I put it into a note, and I review that note every month. And I think it's really useful because then you start to realize, am I seeing a trend? Are there certain things that I don't do? Are there certain times where I'm not that productive? And you start to curate your time and really manage and own your own learning. Being a self-employed individual, I don't have a boss. I don't have someone who can guide me. So having that reflection is really useful. And then finally, get yourself a mentor or a coach. The people who are most successful in my circle and my network are those who have invested in a coach, a mentor who can be honest with them and tell them, this is what you should do. This is maybe something you should do differently. And yeah, their growth is just exponential.
Who inspires you?
It's a hard question because there are a lot of different people. Um, so Josh Dahn is someone he's one of the co-founders of Synthesis. I really love how true he is to the mission. I really love how he cares about the kids. And I think that actually is something that I don't see enough of. So he's one person that I really look up to. Um, there are a few entrepreneurs, some of them don't want to be named for obvious reasons. Um, in my network, who I see as mentors to myself, and actually I look up to them. They're the reason they're my mentors. And then actually, I think that a lot of people who have had career pivots have also been people that I really look up to. It sounds like a cop-out answer, but generally, to have the confidence and the resilience to change career and give almost everything up to start again is not easy. So there's a platform called Career Shifters, and you read all these stories about people who've gone from, I don't know, being an investment banker to starting their own gardening business, being a NASA designer to becoming a school teacher. Like there are so many people who've done things for purpose, with a mission, with a vision, and made it a reality. And I think those are the people that I look up to because they're showing that it's possible. And I think that we can't be what we can't see. So the more people are doing this, the more we actually help change that narrative.
Okay. And what are you going to be working on next?
I mean, CoLab's going to be my main focus. So that's the biggest priority. I am getting married in 4 weeks. So
Congrats.
obviously that's going to be a massive project. It is a massive project, and that's going to be my immediate focus. Um, I also have an idea to work in the property space, specific to the UK. And yeah, just trying to find the right partner to do that with. But it's something that's social impact that can actually make a difference to a lot of homeowners in the UK. I've experienced this problem, and maybe 50 other people I've spoken to also experience this problem. And if I can help, even those 50 people, I think I've done a good thing.
Okay, wow. And is there a question I haven't asked you yet that might be important?
No, I mean you've asked me about my journey, you've asked me about CoLab, you've asked me about the different people I look up to, advice for entrepreneurs. I think for your audience, I'd say that maybe not a question, but my last piece of advice would just to try things out. You don't know what you will love until you try it out. And I don't, if you asked me 10 years ago, would I have fallen into education? Would I have worked in education? The answer would have been no. But by saying yes to different things has given me all the skills I need to actually start in this space. And I believe actually that destiny is a thing. There is something driving you along to do whatever you're meant to do. So um, say yes to opportunities. Don't be afraid to try things out. They will lead to some really cool experiences in your life.
Yeah, I suppose that is a good closing to our podcast, because we have a closing tradition on the podcast where we ask what is one quote or one piece of advice you would leave with the audience, and I think you just gave it. So
I jumped the
yeah,
gun.
no, that's a good one. And then and where can people find you online if they want to follow along with your journey?
So I'm on LinkedIn. My DMs are open. I love helping, especially young people out, just because they have so much potential and sometimes they just need a bit of guidance or encouragement. I'm a careers coach. I also mentor a few entrepreneurs. So if you want to have a chat, more than welcome to. Obviously, you can find CoLab as well. So www.collaborationlaboratory.com. If you're interested to know more, you can go there or follow us on LinkedIn or Facebook. Um, Other than that, obviously, Josh, you have my contact details. Feel free to share them.
Thank you, Alan. And I'm sure you're cooking up something exciting, pun intended. Well, thank you, Alan, and it's been a great pleasure having you on.
Thank you for having me.